Welcome everybody to the potential of ADUs in the GTA, our webinar here. My name is Sarah Sipkar and I'm the founder and co-lead researcher on the ADU Search project. And so our mission is to help Canadians discover the potential in their own backyards. And we really aspire to be the one-stop shop for ADU knowledge and development in Canada. As we know, the construction of both attached and detached additional dwelling units has the potential to increase housing supply in municipalities across Canada. And so we are looking forward to sharing how we feel this tool can help contribute to that. Existing neighborhoods have a lot of potential, and so this will give you a sense of that in the GTHA region. So with that, I'm just going to go just a brief overview of today's agenda. I'm going to do a bit of introduction, some background on the project, how we got here. I am going to do a short tool demonstration. It's not going to be the whole tool, but it's going to be just kind of the critical parts. And then we're going to have our panel discussion, which I'm really looking forward to. We have a diverse group of panelists, practitioners, researchers, builders, for municipal reps. It's going to be great, and I'm excited to kind of discuss additional dwelling units in more depth in the Ontario context. And then we have time for Q&A and then also some closing remarks. Okay, so I'm going to start with our land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that there are 46 treaties and other agreements that cover the territory now called Ontario. We are thankful to be able to work and live in these territories. We are thankful to the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people who have cared for these territories since time immemorial and who continue to contribute to the strength of Ontario and to all communities across the province. So I already introduced myself as part of the ADU Search team, but I did want to introduce the rest of the team. Here with us today is project co-lead Fraser Fathers, who is the lead of the technical side of things. We also have our project manager, Katie Reno, who makes sure this whole thing stayed on the rails for the last year, and grateful for her work there. We also have Ayana Lanceta, who is organizing this webinar. And then from the policy team, Julian Villafuerte Diaz, Adrien Gignac Eddie, Ahmad Al Musa, and then our GIS team, Chris McLeod, Gordon Chung, and Liam Rossborough. I would not be here without this wonderful team over the last year, and so I really am grateful for their contributions in making ADU Search work. I also want to acknowledge and thank CMHC and the Government of Canada who funded this project, our web development partner, Parallel 42, who did a lot of the heavy lifting on this tool. The Cross-Border Institute, particularly Dr. Hannah Mao, who organized a team and helped us with the initial proof of concept and doing a lot of the GIS work. Partners such as the School of Cities, again, the Cross-Border Institute, MPAC and TerraNet, and also a number of municipal staff and representatives who have contributed through their policy review process. And then also, last but certainly not least, Family Services Windsor Essex, who is the lead organization for this project, and their executive director, Joyce Zuck, has been really supportive and basically made this whole project possible. So thank you. And I wanted to just make sure I said those acknowledgements up front. So I'm going to dive in a little bit to just the ADU Search journey and how we got here, just to kind of catch you up to speed over the last few years. So firstly, in 2021, we developed a proof of concept in Windsor, Ontario. Our initial categorization produced 29,000 lots that were eligible for detached ADUs. From that proof of concept, we were successful in being a recipient of the Housing Supply Challenge in the first round, the data-driven round. And from there, we grew to a team of about 10 that I already mentioned. And we started that policy research, going through all the zoning bylaws across the country, all of that, and then also developing the GIS models and then turning that into a beta version that we launched in the fall. Some of you on this call may have seen that, and we're grateful for your contributions and for that kind of process that you helped us make sure that this tool is actually of value to the communities. And then thirdly, basically where we're at right now, we just launched in 30 cities across Canada. We made updates to that beta version, and we were able to successfully secure geospatial data across many provinces. And so we released ADU Search earlier this month. So again, all of this was possible through our policy team, our GIS team, and the many partner organizations. And so as we move forward in April and beyond, when we're kind of through our round of the Housing Supply Challenge, we're looking at developing a sustainability plan to map more cities, to do continued policy development, and also continue to help homeowners through what I'm calling ADU build, but it's a loose working title, and just, recognizing that there's many steps in an ADU process, and our tool kind of helps with one. And we want to help homeowners continue along that journey. Okay, so this is just a really brief overview of the back end, kind of how the sausage is made, so to speak. And I thought it was important because we have shared this with other partners, and just gives you a sense of how we got to where we are. So our policy researchers did a lot of work to collect ADU bylaws across the country, and then we developed a standardized input process. So any potential zoning bylaw that would affect an ADU development, we had a column for, and we inputted those depending on the zoning districts. From there, we developed a flowchart system where we essentially input it into a series of gateways that would be a way to determine how a lot arrives at the suitable, or in this case, it'd be the dark green is what you see. So we make sure it passes the zoning check, the building type check. Is it in any sort of environmental conservation area? From there, we then apply the setbacks, the lot coverage requirements, et cetera, to be able to figure out what that buildable area is. And then from there, we test the minimum size ADU to see if there's enough space basically in the backyard to see if a detached ADU is possible. And so that's kind of what happens on the back end to be able for you to see what color or categorization a lot is. And this will all make sense in a second when I do a tool demo, but it's worth kind of saying up front that that's a really high level overview of about almost a year's worth of work from the policy team to be able to create that system. And then from there, we would do a peer review and outreach to municipalities, to other partners, making sure that there's any outstanding questions or interpretations that our team had, those were clarified. And then from there, we pass it off to our GIS team. And they would essentially run a core mapping model, whether it was them or the Cross Border Institute had done some of this work as well. And then that would essentially get handed off to our web development team, who would visualize it on the front end. So that's kind of just how the sausage is made, so to speak, on the back end, and happy that if there's any questions, you're welcome to reach out to our team as well. Okay, so I'm going to hop into the tool demonstration now, which is hopefully the best part of the webinar. Okay, so just confirming you can still all see my screen and you can see adusearch.ca. Okay, so I'm going to start here, and basically you have to select your province and select your city. I'm actually going to choose Kitchener. I believe the municipality, there's some representatives here, so thank you so much for your work and your review on this. Again, our partnerships in collaboration with municipal staff were really essential to making sure the accuracy of this tool, and just having their buy-in was very encouraging. So thank you to the City of Kitchener, who I know is here today. So it will lead you to the municipal homepage. I'm going to explain the municipal homepage in a second, but I think what's more important is actually to go to the property search first. So when you go to the property search, it loads the map, and I am going to type in an address here that I already looked up. I don't know who lives here, but it works for the purposes of this demonstration. So essentially you type in your address and it brings you to the lot. From there, you can click on it and the information in the sidebar comes up. So in this case, it's green. So it comes up as suitable for detached. The rationale just says, good news, you meet all the basic requirements for building a detached ADU. Then you can also see the buildable area there as well. But from there, if you go to lot information, there's more details. So around lot area, the main dwelling area, if there's an existing secondary building, total buildable area. And then this one I think is really important and interesting, which is the minimum and maximum ADU size that you can build on that buildable area. And that was a calculation that our team did, factoring in all the various restrictions on ADU size. A lot of municipalities have things like can't be larger than the main dwelling, or 50% of the main dwelling, can't be larger than 10% of the lot coverage. There's all these competing factors. And so our team developed a system to be able to calculate that maximum ADU size as well. And it also gives you the zoning. So if you want to go check into some of these details as well, you can access your City of Windsor's zoning bylaws and you know where to look. From there, there's parking, which is a user-generated input, because as you know, parking can be quite difficult to gauge if a lot meets the parking requirements. So this is a way for a property owner to say, yeah, we have a driveway with 2 spots, and I think that meets the parking requirements. Again, it's worth always double checking with your municipality, but if it's a no, that flags it already because it might be something that you might need a variance for. Again, any additional considerations? And so this one we worked with Kitchener on, and they had some suggestions for us, but these were really anything that we couldn't factor into our core mapping, but we thought was important for a property owner to know. So basically, if there's a height requirement, landscaping requirements, access requirements, anything like that. So again, always good to double check with the municipality, and then you can do so here within the next steps, and it brings you to the planning department or any information on ADUs. So that's just a really brief overview of a lot that's green, but let's say your lot comes up yellow. And so this one here, what you would look to right away is a rationale, and it basically says our data indicates that this lot does not meet the minimum frontage requirements to build an ADU. So in Kitchener, I know that there is a frontage requirement. I don't remember what it is off the top of my head, but as you can see, it's a little bit smaller, so that makes sense. And in this case, our model doesn't calculate the buildable area or doesn't give any of that information because basically it didn't pass that gateway, and so that's what it flagged. And then just lastly, just to give you a sense of what a red lot would be. So in this one here, click on it here. The rationale here says the main dwelling unit is not the correct building type and does not allow for ADUs at this time. So another big one in a lot of municipalities is that typically detached additional dwelling units and internal or attached ADUs can only be built with a single detached home, maybe a semi, a townhouse, or a row house. I'm physically located in Windsor, Ontario. Those are the requirements for the City of Windsor. A lot of municipalities in Ontario have that building type requirement. Some don't. Toronto is an example of not having the as strict of a building type requirement. So again, though, you can see right off the bat that it's a no-go because it's likely a multi unit building. So it just gives you a sense of, if that lot is suitable or not. The other thing I want to flag is, so for example, just going back to the yellow really quickly, it says suitable for internal or attached. And our tool did not have a way to really capture some of the building code requirements, such as ceiling height, entries and exits, etc. But what we wanted to flag is that just because the lot isn't suitable for a detached ADU, there still might be a possibility for an internal or attached based on it meeting the zoning and building type requirements. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly go back to the municipal homepage. There is the ability to do a neighborhood search, and this is just all of these lots. The numbers of them we totaled at the census dissemination area level, and then aggregated them up. So the color that that census DA is showing is basically the most commonly occurring type of lot. So if I click on this one here, you can see that 79 properties are suitable with no restrictions. You can also check out the average residential lot size, and just basically gives you a bit more information. You go to the red, gives you more of a sense of why that census DA is red. And this is again a tool that is useful maybe more so for policymakers, researchers, or just for individuals who might want a sense of where ADUs are more possible in their community. So if you go back to the homepage, that information will eventually be available on the data exports. We're going to be releasing it in like basically a CSV format. But if you continue down, I did want to highlight a few other things so you can get a sense of the numbers of the ADUs in your community, the tax revenue that's possible. And then I did want to highlight a couple of other maps that we're not going to be featuring in this webinar, but if you are interested, please do let us know because we're considering doing future webinars on these portions of the tool in particular. One of them is the National Minimum Regulation, which is essentially an artificial set of zoning bylaws that our team developed after doing a national scan. And we created essentially a typology to apply to different cities. And I find this this one really fascinating, but unfortunately we don't have time to get into it today. But if you did want to, you can click on it, and I'll just click on it so you can see what it looks like. But it's essentially capturing how much more potential there is at the census dissemination area level. And I, again, think this is a really important thing for policymakers, but we'll not get into it today. I think the second one that I wanted to highlight, the other ones were the affordability layers. Essentially, we asked the question, can the average homeowner afford the additional carrying costs of an ADU in this census DA? And then the same question for renters, can the average renter with the income, this is again from StatsCan, afford the cost of rent in this DA? I'm not going to get into it because I'm probably going to go over time if I get too into these. But again, these are just ways for policymakers to understand affordability calculations. And it's kind of our, I guess, taking a stab at contributing in that way. And then I did just want to highlight, we do have a section here for industry partners, simply because A, we had some partners that we really wanted to acknowledge, but B, we're looking at developing this a little bit further in terms of having places for builders, developers, real estate, agents, financial institutions, architects, industry partners, really just to be able to have a logo there and sponsor the tool, and then it be a click through. So really connecting homeowners with people who are in this industry and want to build ADUs. Just throwing it out there because there might be some thought on your end around potentially sponsoring the tool. Okay, and the last thing I'm just going to say is there's a little need help thing, and also a resource center, which our team did a great job in terms of compiling as much information as they could. There's resources, there's an FAQ. If you have any questions about the tool, I would suggest going here first. So, if you're concerned about or confused about the categorization, there's a lot of good information there that can maybe answer your question. Okay, so I am mostly on time and getting through this demo. So I apologize that it was brief, and hopefully you found it useful. And again, if there are any questions, and like I said, we're considering doing others in the future. So I'm going to go back now to the slideshow. Okay, so before we get into the panel discussion, I just thought it would be really interesting to kind of show the numbers. This is just our based on the categorization in the different municipalities in the GTHA. We're looking at I guess when you look at these numbers, over almost 400,000 residential lots that are suitable for detached ADUs when you add them all up. And then the tax assessment alone, we worked with MPAC on this piece. There's a lot of potential. Now, this is if all of those lots were to put in a standard detached ADU at around 40 meters squared. We know that that's not going to happen, but when you think about the potential also for internal and attached in addition to these, and that kind of relates to Bill 23 with now allowing 2 additional dwelling units per property by right. You can just see that there's a lot of potential here that is untapped in terms of increasing our housing supply without building on greenfield. So it's kind of exciting when you start to see these numbers. So with that, I am going to get into the panel discussion now. And before I do that, I'm going to introduce our panelists. Each of them gave me a bio, so I'm going to take a moment just to read each of those, and then we'll get into some of the questions. Okay, so firstly, we have Andy Tran, who is the founder of Sweet Additions, which is an architectural design company founded in 2016, focused on assisting small investors and homeowners to create more housing units with additional legal suites. Andy is a registered house and small buildings designer, real estate investor, and developer, and he holds a degree in architectural science from Toronto Metropolitan University, and is also a certified ADU specialist with the ADU Academy in Portland, Oregon. And I came across Andy's work through his excellent social media content. He puts a lot of really good information out around ADUs specifically, so I consider him definitely an expert on the ground and with a lot of good knowledge around building science, so I'm glad he's here today. Next, we have Dr. Karen Chappell, who is currently the director of the School of Cities at the University of Toronto, and she also serves as professor in the Department of Geography and Planning. She is a professor emerita of the City and Regional Planning at the University of California, Berkeley, where she served as department chair and held the Carmel P. Friesen Chair in Urban Studies. I became familiar with Dr. Chappell through her research on accessory dwelling units in California, and a lot of her work helped spur state and local zoning reforms, which as a result, ADUs now comprise 10% of new housing units in California. Dr. Chappell also does work on urban displacement and smart growth, and we're really grateful to have her here in Toronto, and also for her leadership, particularly around the recent School of Cities webinar series on missing middle housing. If you got a chance to catch that series a couple of weeks ago, it was really great, and I learned a lot, and there was a lot of really good partners participating in that. So next we have Elizabeth Ferrugia, and she is a senior planner with the Ontario planning firm, with an Ontario planning firm, and has development files all across southwestern part of the province. Her decade-long career started with waves of legislative changes, which forced her to better integrate planning with other areas of public and municipal administration, such as infrastructure planning and municipal finance. In recent years, she's focused on applying an equity and inclusion lens to this integration to better demonstrate to municipalities, clients, and classrooms how better and more equitable outcomes could be achieved in planning. She's also a sessional instructor with McMaster University's City Lab program, and she teaches human-centered design there as well. And she currently lives and works in Hamilton, Ontario. And lastly, we have Bianca Metz, who is the creator and lead consultant for the Giving Tree, where she provides turnkey tiny house solutions for those seeking a more affordable and sustainable lifestyle. Bianca has been a driving force behind influencing tiny homes across Ontario to be recognized by municipalities as temporary additional dwelling units, allowing the tenant to own the tiny home and enter into a land lease agreement with a property owner. Bianca is a very fierce advocate, and she's also the co-producer of the Tiny Home Show in Ancaster, Ontario. We're excited to be attending this year, and you should definitely check it out if you're interested. And she's a permacultural designer and lives in a 240 square foot tiny home with her family. Okay, so we have an excellent panel, and I'm really excited to dive into it. So I'm going to just go to the next slide. And so you can kind of get a preview of some of the questions, and we'll kind of, use these as a basis, but I'm sure that we can spin off and discuss other things as well. But firstly, I think a lot of people on this call are interested in ADUs as a solution, but I think it's actually really important that we understand it, that we understand the challenges and kind of where we're at and the context, more from that maybe both on the ground and macro perspective. And so the first question that we have is what challenges are we facing? And I'll add here in Ontario and specifically the GTHA. And I'm going to go to Dr. Karen Chappell first, if you wanted to start off, and then I will kind of pass it off to the different panelists. I can't see everyone, so if you do want to answer, feel free to jump in, and we'll kind of go from there. But go ahead, Karen.
Great. Thank you so much. And thanks for the fantastic presentation. It's so exciting. And you have some great questions in the chat. So hope to leave lots of time for that. So let's talk a little bit about these barriers, these challenges that we still face. And, why are we not scaling up in the same way that California did? You heard Sarah say is 10% of all new construction is of accessory dwelling units of some kind. So how do we scale up? And we did discuss this in our webinar, which Sarah mentioned. You can see the webinar at affordablemissingmiddle.ca if you want to go back and watch it. But I divide the barriers into three types. Bylaw reforms, the need for more bylaw reforms than what we have already, the need for implementation tools, particularly strategies to address education and trust, and third, financial barriers. So in terms of the bylaws, the challenges we're facing, we sort of had the first generation of bylaw reform already in Ontario, but we're going to have to do the second generation. And that's what we saw in California is they passed a new bill every year for 4 years, and they're still passing new bills. It's a lot of work. It's a process. So the types of things we still need to work on, there are some deal breakers for when you want to build a lot. I love that picture in Kitchener. The frontage thing in that lot looked, it was yellow, but boy, it's a big lot, right? So these frontage regulations, setback regulations, sometimes the height limits are prohibiting a second floor, the separation requirements between the main dwelling and the ADU. These are all issues that still need to be confronted. In the bylaws, there's also a lot of redundancies still, and these could be simplified a whole lot. So sometimes, you have lot size regulations and gross floor area regulations and lot coverage regulations, and they're actually making it really hard, and they're redundant with each other. And you probably could just use one of those regulations or two, not all three, to control the size and coverage. And then there's also the issue with lot size of discrimination. So, I mean, and this is something we worked really hard on in California, because the people with smaller lots are lower income homeowners. So, we want to make sure that you can build even if your lot is 4,000 or 3,000 square feet. And that changed in California made a big difference for low income homeowners. So that's the first one, bylaw reforms. Second, education and outreach. And implementation generally. So what California did really well is it made a kind of a customer service attitude, a customer friendly attitude towards building additional dwelling units or accessory dwelling units. So, it had the service decks that trained the zoning desk folks to really be welcoming. It put out a lot of kind of easy plans, had one-stop shops, had just tools that were super accessible, particularly for older people, because these are older people are really scared about doing a huge renovation on their house, but yet they own a lot of these properties. So they need to have held through the whole process. So it's really important to train your folks in customer service. And on the other side, there's also the kind of trust element and the fact that, a lot of people have been doing these illegally. They want a pathway to legalization. They're scared of the local government. So overcoming those barriers are really important. And third, finance. So finance, this issue that we can't borrow in the future rental income stream, the interest rates going up is a bad sign for refis, makes it really hard to get finance. And so we really need the federal government to step in here and make it easier for people to get loans. I'll stop there.
Thanks so much, Karen. I appreciate that perspective a lot. And I'm wondering if there's anyone else who wants to jump in, maybe some of the challenges that you're seeing on the ground. I know Karen kind of touched on some of the policy issues, but I don't know, Bianca or Andy, if you have any thoughts on what challenges you kind of see on the ground.
Sure, I'll chime in here for a little bit. So I think having worked with about a dozen municipalities at the moment with regards to getting some proposals in place, I find the policies actually to be pretty good locally, with the municipal level, as well as larger scale with Bill 23 and the minimum requirement of 3 units. I think we have a lot to work with based on the recent changes. We're doing pretty well there. One of the big challenges really is the finance, as Karen had mentioned. And it's not really just about getting the loans, it's about making it viable as a long-term solution, because the cost of construction is really, really high. As someone who has built an ADU and have with clients who are building them, it's really hard to justify the cost. And I think that for the average homeowner to be able to build these, it's going to be very difficult. And so the example that I like to point to is Portland, Oregon, who've had these policies in place for 15 years. And it's not like Portland, Oregon is full of ADUs everywhere. I think of all the lots, it's still in the single digits in terms of the people that have access, the policy and actually has built them. And I think allowing people to do more with the accessory structure is going to be important. So with Bill 23, the minimum requirement is 3 units on a lot. Some cities like Toronto and Hamilton have already pushed for 4 and 5 units on single lots. But because construction is so high on a new structure for foundations, for utility systems, I think it makes a lot of sense for the planning staff at the individual municipalities to look at potentially allowing more than 1 unit in the ADUs to make that cost of construction lower from a per square footage standpoint. Right. So a lot of them are allowing 2-3 units on the existing structure, but only 1 unit in the accessory dwelling unit. And if you allow 2, which I know that they do allow them in Oregon as well as in Alberta, where their policies have been around for a few years, it really brings down the cost of construction. And I think that really is something that is going to be, from a practical standpoint, allow it to be more accessible to homeowners and smaller investors.
Okay, great, thank you.
Just want to point that out.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I was going to say, Bianca, did you have anything? I saw you unmute yourself for a second as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks again for having me. I'm sorry if I am choppy. I'm on satellite in the middle of the country. So hopefully I'm clear. But kind of 2 aspects really jump out to me as someone who's on kind of the grassroots advocacy for tiny homes specifically. And then I guess as it blends into additional dwelling units is quite honestly the social concept of NIMBYism. And so I know before Bill 23, as Bill 108 is rolled out, we saw a lot of NIMBYism and a lot of combating against building additional dwelling units. And I really think that that comes from lack of understanding and education as to what the additional dwelling units look like, how they're built, potential tenancy and different things. So I think that that's a certain challenge that every municipality and society will certainly face, and then we can address the solutions on that in a bit. But on a micro scale, I really think that expensive fees, and then something that we can't quite avoid is the inflated building costs. Nothing is affordable nowadays, so I think that's one of the bigger things. And as Andy mentioned, just the barrier to entry and the access to gaining support to build these additional dwelling units is hard for the homeowner who already has, a lot of equity built into the home, but just the average person who's entering into the housing market as well. It's going to be really hard for people to build affordable solutions that take the I guess macro scale of developer builds and put that wealth back into the personal pockets of homeowners. So those are kind of the 2 focal points for me.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you. I think you guys summarize a lot of the problems and challenges really eloquently, particularly even the NIMBYism piece too. So it's definitely an important thing to discuss. So I'm going to go to the next question though, just around solutions. And I'm actually going to start with Elizabeth on this one, and just looking at what are some of the solutions that you've seen? I know that you have a group of students you've worked with, you've worked in municipalities, and yeah, just curious if you have any thoughts there.
Yeah, like I'll go back to maybe start with like Karen, the way you've categorized the challenges. The solutions that I see right now and that are tied to ADU search and the tool and what it's doing is back to that education, collaboration, and trust piece. And I know initially when you're thinking about solutions that may sound fluffy, but I think with a lot of these places like Portland, California, or even other municipalities in Canada, like Edmonton, actually, they've had a lot of time to go through the process. They've had a lot of time to build the tools, amend their bylaws again or annually, right? So I think one of the solutions is having tools like ADU search open up, what can happen, how much can it cost? And then from there, having homeowners who I find now have a lot of energy around this, a lot of motivation and curiosity around this, approach the tool, bring what information they have to then the municipalities, and then work collaboratively with the municipalities to figure out, well, what are some of the setbacks that just aren't going to work? I think a lot of municipalities, if I can just say, in coming up with solutions, have gotten a lot of flack for the initial first evolution of their bylaw reforms, but that's what's needed. An example I like to give out there is the city of Hamilton. Like I've seen from the last maybe 2-3 years, initially when they had their ADU centric bylaw come out, they've made a lot of housekeeping amendments along the way as they've learned through committee of adjustments, minor variants, other kind of site plan applications that might come through. And I think that is part of the solution, right? Creating more tools, creating more education, coming to the table and collaborating more on a site-specific application that's coming in, and then policymakers and planners taking back all the lessons they're getting from their permits, from their setbacks and all of that, and saying, well, guess we're going to have to change the bylaw for 2023, 2024, and moving forward with that. I think the other piece I'll add to making solutions is, and this kind of dips into maybe our Bill 23 conversation later on, but I think there's a lot of energy from the provincial government to streamline the process, make it more simple and all that, which is always needed, I think. I think in this case, part of the solution is needing room for that collaboration to happen. Like organically, processes have to change. There's got to be a lot of change management, either between staff or consultants that are weighing in on this file. And people just gotta have to learn through motion. I think sometimes it comes down to that. And there are times where you can't really put time on it, right? Everyone's just learning on both sides of the table, taking it back and reworking it. So I think that's part of the solution. Like we have to be tactile with this.
Yeah, those were great comments. I'm wondering if anyone else has anything to add there around solutions. No? Okay. Well, I see Karen, I think she was about to unmute herself. But I guess the next question that I have for everybody, and it's kind of already been discussed a bit, which is around what other regions or what states are doing. And I guess maybe another way to frame this is, Ontario doesn't need to reinvent the wheel. Other city, like there has been other examples. We've seen other advocacy happening both across the country, and we can just look at our West Coast provinces to see some of that as well. So I'm just curious if there's any specific examples of something that you saw that worked really well, whether that is on the zoning, like a zoning change side of things, or some kind of municipal process, or maybe it's also what's happening on the grassroots. Because I know that we have a variety of people attending this webinar from all over the place. And us as individuals can also play a role kind of in that process in terms of seeing what others are doing and adopting it as well. So is there someone in particular who wants to start that one off? I might go to you, Karen, just because I know you have a lot of experience in California, and I draw a lot of inspiration from them as well.
Yeah, I'll kick us off. I did almost unmute when we started talking about solutions, because it's what I was thinking about what Liz, brought up, Bill 23, and then yet this kind of issue of collaboration and trust. So it's kind of this, you have to have that heavy hand of the province, but at the same time, you really need local action, and it's very specific. And the NIMBY issues are very specific. So each community has to really, figure out what they want to be and deal with their own kinds of issues around neighborhood character. And so this brings me to an example, which is, the city of Berkeley, actually, California has a huge number of NIMBYs. It's a terrible, people are fairly affluent and they like their low density neighborhoods. And boy, they fought ADUs. And then they started to realize that their children couldn't live in the community, their grandchildren couldn't live there, they're commuting 2 hours to see their grandchildren. And then a community group came together, a few kind of, retired government employees that have built their own ADUs. They came together and they started doing workshops on Saturday mornings to demystify it. And so it was neighbors teaching neighbors. And that helped kind of build the trust. And then the neighbors started persuading their counselors to vote for reform, and the whole thing kind of came together. But so that grassroots, neighborhood block by block kind of action, going and seeing the ADU next door, realizing that it didn't cause a parking problem, and then having your neighbors help you figure out how to deal with the bylaws, is a great example, I think.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, one of the things I love about ADUs is that they're one of the most grassroots form of housing development, and it kind of forces you to. I have one on my property, and it forces you in a good way to communicate with your neighbors, build those relationships, that trust. I'm wondering if anyone else has seen something like this. Bianca, I see you have unmuted yourself there.
Yeah, thank you. I might take this opportunity to mention something that's happening on the ground in Ontario to kind of bring it into scale. The Grey County have recently reformed they enacted their official plan amendment 11, which came through in November of last year. And it took a while for their amendments to flow through. As everyone knows, Grey County is, it's urban, it's rural, it's resort, it's everything. But anyway, so I had approached them the year before with a land leasing framework, specifically tenant-owned tiny homes. And so this framework, as Sarah mentioned in my introduction, is specifically the person who lives in the ADU owns the ADU. And so through this just simple concept, and that's how I live personally, is on leased land in my tiny home. So through this advocacy and presenting and delegating and XYZ, there was a lot of positive feedback from municipalities seeing and recognizing this as a positive affordable housing solution, in that people can now enter the housing market at a fraction of the cost of actually purchasing a property or a home. And so that specifically is Grey County, and they have an item policy 10, and anyone is obviously welcome to go and look at that. It's up on their website. And that specifically is a tiny home bylaw, zoning bylaw policy that allows, and it specifically states that a property owner can enter into a land lease agreement with a tiny home tenant. And so this is speaking specifically to kind of the ideation behind unique uses of, well, the affordable housing crisis, and also just how we continue to adapt our cities and how we see growth. And so it's really interesting to try and connect the pieces and get financing and insurance and all of these bigger beasts backing this concept. And it's really great that it's all kind of coming together. But as I reach out to more municipalities and more counties across Ontario, there's so much support for this type of framework that it's hopefully going to allow additional dwelling unit building to increase, and the kind of concept of where the wealth goes is a little more kind of, I guess, divided between someone who's living in the house and then the person who owns the property. But this also just gives a really good benchmark to thinking differently and thinking creatively and thinking sustainably and thinking about gentle intensification. And so it's happening. These bylaws are coming forth and they're already in process. We already have people going through the motions. So I think that's a really good, I guess, example of how the additional dwelling unit, specifically when Bill 108 was enacted, how things have developed on the grassroots level. And so it's kind of a good, just a good benchmark to take a look at it within Ontario.
That's great. Thank you for that. That's a really great example that I wasn't even familiar about. So I'm excited to look more into it. I'm going to ask one more question related around the Bill 23 changes, and just asking panelists around what do you think about these recent changes and how are you seeing them impact municipalities? I think I'll go maybe to you, Andy, first, if you want to take a stab at that. Oh, you're on mute. There you go.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's Bill 23 has made a big difference. Now, a lot of the policies within Bill 23 have already been enacted in Bill 108 back in 2019, but it seems like there was just not a lot of awareness around that. And I think with Bill 23, it really kind of, it seems like there was a lot more, basically it sped the process up for municipalities, and things like certain development charges like parkland dedication fees and things like that that have been eliminated as a result of Bill 23 had actually helped the process for a lot of homeowners to be able to build, because, you know, when it comes to building, as I mentioned, cost is one of the biggest factors. And even if it's a few $1,000s, that really helps to make the project a lot more feasible, right? So specifically around Bill 23, I think that's that awareness that has been made around it really forced a lot of municipalities to enact some of these policies a lot quicker compared to Bill 108 like 3 years ago.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. And Liz, did you have a thought there too?
Yeah, no, I just want to kind of reiterate that, like, Bill 23, especially, I think if I'm going to tease out like specifically parking and municipal fees, that was already in motion when a lot of municipalities were implementing Bill 108. Like, you know, just to clear the air, I felt like, because at that time I was a municipal planner, with Bill 108, there was a lot of motion with municipalities to implement this. We saw a lot of things come out of Windsor, London, like even I think in the Peterborough area. So municipalities were well on their way. And I just felt like with Bill 23, it really picked a specific metric, you know, like one parking space and waiving municipal fees when that was already occurring. I know, just to go back to the question about, you know, what do I think about recent changes? I just specifically want to talk about the unit size because this is something like I don't really know what my position is yet. I just have been trying to observe it because I understand that if municipalities are not to dictate a minimum unit size and defer to the building code and whatever they're saying, it's like the starting point of 200 square feet, which can work in a lot of tiny home developments, I think. But I don't know that that's the appropriate starting point square footage to talk about affordable housing, especially in an ADU context. So a lot of municipalities that I saw at that time were starting at the 400 square feet and saying, what can we implement within that that also actually layers in accessibility dimension. So things like maneuverability through corridors and through rooms and washrooms, actually. So if we're saying there's no minimum unit size, it causes a lot of uncertainty of then what is a suitable unit to hold one bedroom, or are we only building maybe bachelor units to start off with? And then I'll just kind of end with, at that time, I was doing a lot of research of what was occurring out west in a lot of the ADU market. And we were seeing things like bachelor and one bedrooms get priced at premium market rents. So then it goes back to the conversation about equity and affordability. If we're just building bachelor and studios at $2,100 per month in the Ontario context, that's well above the average rental market price that we see through the census. So maybe it comes back to the question of like, where do we want our ADUs to ideally be? Is it a suitable unit? Could it kind of promote that high quality of life at the same time? And if municipalities maybe don't have that autonomy to set the unit size through other means like GFAs, and kind of like Andy mentioned, I think at one point, it has to be less than the principal dwelling and all that, then what is at municipalities' disposal to ensure that the unit meets a bit of a higher standard of like living quarters, right? Other than the building code. So that was the only aspect that when I saw it out in Bill 23, I thought, oh, a bit disappointing, but I want to see where it goes. Oh, you're on mute, Sarah.
Thanks. I was just going to say that's a great point and a good segue to the question I really did want to ask and get thoughts on, which was if we think that the Ontario policy landscape is conducive to affordable ADU development. Sometimes ADUs are painted as, an affordable solution, and I do think that there are ways that they can be. There are avenues, but within this context, is that what we're seeing? And sometimes yes, sometimes no is kind of my anecdotal experience. So I'm wondering if any others have thoughts around this current policy landscape and its relationship to affordability. Karen, I know you've done some work on this, so I don't want to put you on the spot again, but I would just love to pick your brain on that.
Yeah, well, I'll start because, I think Andy raised some great points about construction costs already. And so the question is, to me, what can we do to reduce those construction costs? And is there a solution in modular? Are there ways of reducing onerous building code requirements, whether we're, talking about fire or infrastructure, or other type utilities, what can we do to make it, to cut costs? Because it all adds up. And then once you have templates, though, once you have standard plans, you should be able to cut some of the soft costs. So that should go away as the industry matures. But some of the hard issues are about materials, cost of materials, cost of labor. And is there a way maybe that the province can help subsidize some labor through apprenticeship programs or something? So, I think we have to get really creative. The median cost in California is $150,000 US. We did a survey of 800 homeowners and we got 150,000 US, so 225,000 Canadian. But we're building for what, 350 or 400 here? So there must be a way to get it down.
Yeah, thanks. Go ahead, Andy.
Just give a practical example of bringing the cost down. And this also ties into Elizabeth's question with regards to minimum sizes as well. So we have a number of projects right now where we're converting detached garages, right? Existing detached garages. And the feasibility of that really comes down to whether it's actually a structurally sound existing structure. And In almost all cases, we have to bring an engineer to assess the foundation, to assess the structure. And in those instances, the homeowners are able to save probably 100,000, like six figures, in not having to put a foundation and not having to, construct the building envelope. They already have the framing, they have the siding. Obviously, you have to do all the interior work, all the insulation, all of that to meet today's building code. You have to bring the services in, but it can potentially save up to 50% of the cost. So that's kind of a practical solution that we are seeing. Obviously, there are other potential ways. I think that prefab is definitely going to be the way moving forward. US has made a lot of progress. I've spoken to many vendors and manufacturers here who are in that process. We are still in the very early stages, and because of high overhead of running a facility, there's still a lot of challenges there. But I think that the price will go down. And just the very last point is that that affordability issue. Like, I did a trade show for Eco Fair a couple of months ago, and a lady came up and asked me, well, I heard these things cost anywhere between 300 to 500,000. How's that affordable? And the issue around that is that they conflate doing these and people not being able to afford them as one of the reasons why this is not affordable. Like, the reason why these are not affordable is not because you're able to build ADUs. It's in spite of that, right? Like, affordability is a bigger issue around a lot of other factors that we haven't even touched on, right? And that's a discussion for another day. But really, ultimately, I think it comes down to having the tools, allowing homeowners and investors to have access to them, eliminating a lot of the steps from the municipal level, and kudos to a lot of municipalities that have done a lot of that to allow people to have more access to it. I think we're along the right path, right? Like, I think it just takes time.
Thanks, Andy. And Bianca, if you wanted to go ahead with that one as well.
Yeah, that's a really great point. I'm going to dial right into this kind of concept. In my opinion, policy and process just go so hand in hand. So Liz had mentioned about the Hamilton landscape and some of the challenges within their kind of first draft, I guess, of enacting their ADU policy. And so the process in which these ADUs are being expedited, the minutia is really important. And I think municipalities, I want to respect and understand and appreciate that they need to be careful and tread lightly and really make the best decisions that make the most sense for their region and for their area. However, getting caught in the minutia of the application process specifically can be detrimental to implementing ADUs. And so Hamilton, as an example, has a lot of requirements that don't necessarily match a lot of the properties here, and they're a little, in my opinion, too restrictive, such as parking restrictions and setback requirements and other different, XYZ. So many of the first ADU policy or applications that came through in Hamilton, as someone who's sitting on the sidelines watching this all happen, not as someone who was a part of it, a lot of these applications went to the Committee of Adjustments. And so these applications are going forward to a group of people who, I'll be very transparent with you, oftentimes don't understand the policies themselves, and then thus making decisions on these applications that they don't understand. And unfortunately, NIMBYism is a layer in that as well for these policymakers and for these, oftentimes gatekeepers. And I'm not saying that is the case in Hamilton. That's something to consider when you have parties like the Committee of Adjustments and that they're kind of making the decision yay or nay based on a minor variance. And so from the macro scale of affordability all the way down to just even getting a permit in hand, it's enough to deter the average homeowner to not even try. Having that initial investment to just get a no and to have a long dragged out process is really, really difficult. And I know Bill 23 will eliminate and expedite a lot of the processes, which is fantastic in certain frames. And if we want to get into the environmental context, which we can do in a separate webinar, for sure, it can be detrimental, but also really conducive to gentle intensification, as I mentioned. So I think the policy landscape at this point has the opportunity and the chance to be conducive to affordable housing solutions by eliminating those restrictions and really just opening up to alternative measures and alternative thinking, and not being so restrictive, especially when it comes to zoning, and how land is designated. And just respecting that different land is used for different things, but really understanding that homes on land is extremely important moving forward. So I think, again, that the minutia of it's really difficult, and then as Andy said, I will 1000% piggyback on the concept that affordability is just too large of a layer to really combat at this point within it. So.
Yeah, that's great. And I think what I'm hearing is that, we're on the right path. We're on the right trajectory, so to speak, that all of these kind of solutions take time, both on the ground and at the policy levels. I agree with that. I'm in the Windsor, Ontario context, and I've seen that happen as well. I did want to get to Q&A. We're at 12:55, and so we went a little longer on the discussion because I just thought a lot of the comments were making were so great. So I'm going to try to get to one or two questions here as well. And as we, we'll try to do a hard end at one, but we'll see what we can do. The one question I have is, without the significant and well-implemented building code changes to dovetail with any of these proposed bylaw and planning modifications, do you see major concerns with proper implementation into reality in a timely manner? So I think the question really gets at the crux of where does the building code factor into this? We're talking about zoning, but we haven't necessarily talked about the building code hangups. I don't know, Liz, I don't know if you had a thought there. No,
I was just laughing at it because the many planning discussions I've been a part of that talked about building code, like whether it's literally electric vehicles or here 8 attached or detached additional dwelling units. Maybe more practically, if we're going back to that unit size issue, yeah, if the building code is not there to be updated to talk about what is an appropriate habitable space in today's world, then you have no other, I think, instrument than to fall back on bylaws and zoning and, the regulations around that. So I think and it goes back to kind of the comment I made earlier about if Bill 23 is pointing out there's no minimum unit size, then let's hope that the building code is reflective of modern day unit size then, right? I think that maybe should have been made a bit of a check and balance. But yeah, I just to get back to you, Peter, about that, I do think it needs to be relooked at. I don't know if it's, maybe a suitable kind of regulation at this point in time to just do something so modern as ADUs, right?
Right. Yeah. And I was going to see if you had a thought on that as well, knowing that you've built a few of these.
Yeah, so I think it really forces us as designers to be super creative. So we've done anything between 180 square feet studio units up to designing around 1,000 square feet on these ADUs. And yeah, the code allows for that flexibility. I think that not requiring a minimum, I personally feel that's actually a good thing, so that we can design things like single car garages to be bachelor units. And if that's suitable for someone and it's more cost effective for them to do that conversion, I think it's fine. And it's not just the building code that is the challenge. There's actually other codes that are not part of the Ministry of Municipal Housing, but there's the electrical safety code, there's the plumbing codes, there's gas codes, and working within the framework, all of that is a really big challenge, not just for a experienced contractor or builder, it's, let alone a homeowner, right? So if we have some tools where we can sort of integrate that a little better, I think that that's going to really improve things from the code standpoint.
Okay, great. And I'm just noticing we're at 12:58, so I don't think I'm going to have time to get to any more of the questions. I know there were several in the chat, and so my team is going to try to connect and respond to them if they can in the chat and or afterwards. And so I'm just going to have to kind of wrap it up. This discussion's been really great. Thinking about the landscape of ADUs in Ontario, there's a lot of work to be done, and all of you play such an important role. And I think that there is, I know, Karen, you've used the term a necessary coalition that's kind of needed, and you've been doing a lot of work within missing missing middle, but I think that's even required for detached ADUs as well, detached and internal ADUs. I think they're a really, low hanging fruit in terms of, something that's achievable for a lot of municipalities to increase their housing, their number of housing units. And so thank you all for the work that you're doing. I do think it's extremely important. I know there's a lot of people on the call who do this work as well. So please reach out. We're going to be sharing this recording, and you can reach out to each of the individuals. And so with that, I'm just going to do a last screen share here. Hopefully you can see this all. Just wanted to say thank you again. Thank you to my team who put this together. What to look out for. We're going to be mapping more cities. If your city is not online and you would like it to be, we can have a conversation about that. We'll need some geospatial data, and we're looking at ways that we can add more cities. Additionally, we're going to be launching ADU Build is what we're calling it, but there might be something in the future around supporting homeowners through this process and streamlining it a little bit more. Additionally, there's opportunities for policy development, consulting, all that good stuff. Stay in touch with us. If you notice something on the site that maybe catches your attention, you want more information about it, please feel free to reach out via email. And we'll also be sending out a short survey and this recording as well, just to get your feedback. And if you do want more webinars, please do let us know. So with that, I'm just going to say thank you again to everybody. And again, I'm apologizing for those who didn't get to answer those questions, but let's keep this discussion going. Feel free to reach out, and thank you all who attended today. So thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of the day.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks,
everyone.
Sarah.
This is awesome.
Take care.
Yeah,